But anyway, welcome everybody. I want to mention that the programs this semester are sponsored by International Papers by Ticonderoga Mill, and we want to thank them for helping make North Country Live happen. Tonight's topic is a pretty timely one, given the arrival of spring, all the nice weather lately, and of course the increased amount of use in the Adirondack backcountry, the large numbers of people that have been looking to explore the great outdoors. And in fact, I don't know how many folks read the New York Times, but there was a great piece yesterday on how this is not just something that is impacting us here in the Adirondacks, obviously, but all over the country, in particular, what its impact has been for backcountry rescue efforts by rangers like Jenna, who are going to join us tonight, and other volunteers out there. So this program is Backcountry Preparedness 101. It's my pleasure to introduce our host for the evening, Jimmy Cunningham. He's the director of our Wilderness Recreation Leadership Program at the college. Jimmy started at the college in 2006, started teaching then. He's been director of the program since 2013. He's got a master's in environmental and outdoor education from SUNY Cortland. He's a wilderness first responder, also a state licensed guide, among many other things. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jimmy Cunningham.
Great, thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. For those of you that were here for our live session on managing recreation, welcome back. Thanks for taking the time to be with us on this lovely evening where we are here in the Adirondacks. We have a nice sunny evening, probably about 50, 55 degrees out there. So this is the perfect time to discuss backcountry preparedness. Now, for me here at the college, backcountry preparedness is super important. This is what we do. We're training outdoor leaders here. So for me to condense all of that information into a 1 hour remote Zoom session is tricky, right? It's a tall order. And so what we did during the Manage the Recreation session was we had a panel of professionals that came on, and we generated a discussion based on their backgrounds. And so we're going to do the same thing tonight because it's a great use of our time, and we can get a lot of information out there within this hour stretch. It's also great too. Zoom is awesome because we can have so many people join us. We had a lot of registrants for this. So again, thanks for being with us. The goal this evening is to talk with our panelists. We have panelists from different backgrounds, local guides, professors, educators, management, and Adirondack Park users. We're going to kind of see what they have to say about a few things, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions from the audience. I think we had a few questions last time around. So I'm going to introduce the panelists. So very first, we have Jack Drury with us tonight, co-owner of Leading E.D.G.E, a professional development firm. He is the founder of the Wilderness Rec program, and he's been an Adirondack guide for 45 years. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you.
We also have Chelsea Walker here with us again. Chelsea, thanks for being with us. She's a licensed guide with Scenic Route Guiding and Gear Rentals, also administrator of the Adirondack Backcountry Facebook Hikers Group, and a resident of Wilmington. Chelsea, thanks for being with us again.
Pleasure.
We also have Will Roth, who is one of our own here at the college, adjunct faculty member, teaches in the Wilderness Rec program, as well as the Expeditionary Studies program at SUNY Plattsburgh. He is the head rock and ice guide at EMS in Lake Placid, also a rock and ice guide for Rockin' River in Keene. Welcome, Will.
Hey, thanks, Jimmy.
And we also have Bobby O'Connor here from Paul Smith College, professor in adventure leisure management. And Bobby's an all-around guy, paddler, climber, mountaineer. He's got a lot of experience. So thanks for being with us, Bobby.
Thank you, Jimmy.
And we have Jenna Curcio, Region 5 New York State DEC Forest Ranger from Essex and Franklin County. Jenna, thank you for being with us this evening.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw out the first question, and we'll try to go kind of in order of how I introduce people here, just to kind of kick things off. So the first question is, why is this topic of backcountry preparedness so important to you? Jack, you can kick us off here.
Well, speaking from a personal level, it's about my love of the Adirondacks. I first visited the Adirondacks. I was figuring it out before we came on, and 64 years ago. I was pretty young, obviously, but I fell in love with the Adirondacks, and it's been a lifetime love affair. And so I care about it. And I knew at the age of 12 that this is where I wanted to live. This is where I wanted to find a career. And then you build on that, my love of wilderness, and let me say wilderness with a capital W, because I want to make sure people understand, when it's capital W, that means it's designated wilderness. And we also have all this other great land around us that's also small capital W, that has the characteristics of wilderness. It may not be official wilderness. And that started and was from my first visit, and then was reinforced with my NOLS training out in Wyoming. I attended the University of Wyoming for a couple of years, and then my work with teaching with the Wilderness Education Association. So that's in a nutshell.
Great, thanks, Jack. Chelsea, how about you? I'll put it over to you.
I'd have to say a lot of my answers kind of parallel what Jack was just saying. Obviously, I don't have the 60 some plus years of experience or anything. I'm working on it. I just have a really strong love for the outdoors. It's done a lot for me for my entire life. I was privileged enough to get to travel a lot as a kid, and we were more of like a, in the car on the road kind of thing. We hit national parks. I was always playing in the woods. I had some really amazing opportunities with some different camps. Not as many as I would have liked, but it was still there. And just knowing like what it does for me as a person, taking care of the wilderness also has to do with taking care of the people that are in the wilderness, and those two kind of go together. So along with keeping people safe, that's also going to help keep the wilderness in a pristine state, so that way we can all enjoy it. I guess in a brief synopsis, that's my answer.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Will, I'll throw it over to you. Why is this topic of backcountry preparedness important to you?
Sure, thanks, Jimmy. Well, I think that just what both Jack and Chelsea said is, I totally agree with their love for the outdoors. And I would say that by being prepared appropriately for your time spent in the outdoors, you'll have a better time when you're out there, which is really what it's all about, is, really about enjoying your time. If you didn't enjoy being out there, why would you go? So I think that, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to me, is because the better prepared you are, the more you'll enjoy your time while you're out there.
Great. Thank you, Will. Bobby, I'll throw it over to you. What about you as far as, your experience with Paul Smith College? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, I don't know if I can add too much more, but I will say that I really enjoy that light bulb moment where it starts to click for students to why this is important. And like everyone mentioned, to keep the wilderness pristine and to enjoy our time in the backcountry safely. And I came into this industry without really any experience in it. So I kind of started off from not knowing anything to, I think, getting to an okay spot. So I really enjoy watching the students pick up on that and start to understand why we're starting to learn some of these things.
Great, thanks, Bobby. Jenna, how about you? Anything to add to that for backcountry preparedness?
Yeah, so I think just coming from my perspective as a ranger, our responsibility is to come out and, help find people that are lost or hurt in the woods. And a lot of the time, things can't be helped, accidents happen, there's stuff that's unavoidable. But I think that there have been a lot of instances where with a little bit more preparation, a little bit more education, things can be avoided. So I think that just working on that and learning and knowing how to use your resources and get yourself in and out of the woods it could help avoid a lot of those circumstances.
Great, thank you. So I'm seeing a lot of trends with things like safety, enjoying yourself, being able to, accomplish your goals, things like that. I'd like to know, and maybe we don't have to go super far into this, but what are some of your, top 3 or 5 pieces of gear that you really rely on for being out in the backcountry and being prepared? And I'll start with Will this time.
Sure, thanks, Jimmy. Again, Probably, well, I'll try to keep it to 3 here. I would say that a really small, lightweight headlamp is probably always in my pack. Something, I think that any of the new models, I'm not like sponsored by Petzl or Black Diamond or any of those companies, but they do make some really, really solid, some solid pieces of equipment, especially in that small headlamp market, that if a lot more people carried them all the time in their packs with them, I think a lot more people wouldn't get in trouble. And then probably a multi-tool, something like a Leatherman or something along those lines. Having something like that, again, can really change, make something a mild inconvenience that otherwise would really be a pretty serious matter. And then probably the last thing I would say is always having a way to have some sort of an emergency fire starter with you. The new, well, I shouldn't say new, but newer, modern butane lighters that they have, the windproof, waterproof, basically everything that can still get a flame going. Those things are that's something that's always in my pack with me. And I can keep going, but I'll leave it at 3 there, as I'm sure I've already taken 3 off of the list from the rest of the panelists. So,
who'd like to go next? Bobby, how about you?
Sure. Yeah. I think I'm gonna kind of go in a little bit opposite direction here, but I won't hopefully make it too long or confusing. But I'm gonna steal SUNY Plattsburgh's their setup, and what you taught me and what I kind of stole from them is packing for the situation. And that one way I go about doing that is having communication, navigation, fixing people, and fixing gear. So based on the activity that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to kind of pull from those 4 categories and start filling my pack with things that are going to help with those 4 scenarios. That being said, I think one thing that goes in my pack every single time that we go out is a satellite communication device, something like this. I really enjoyed working with them the last couple of years, and just kind of a big advocate for people to have them and know how to use them.
Excellent. Yeah, we use those here at the college when we're out on practicum. I think we've also used the InReach as well, or the spot pagers. Those have been a really nice tool for us to have, for sure.
Yeah, this one is the InReach, the bigger.
Excellent.
Yep.
Very cool. Jenna, how about you? Anything to add to that from your perspective as a forest ranger, going out, helping with, rescues in different scenarios?
I think typically I try and have at least a hard copy map. I don't necessarily always use it, but I always have my compass and map there. I like to use technology. I also like to have the skills to not need technology, but tools like Onyx Hunt are really useful, and they're super nifty. I always have my GPS with me just to take points where I need them. Other than that, a lot of it is weather dependent and seasonal. But yeah, the fire starter is a huge thing for me too. And then one thing that rangers almost always have is we carry webbing. So if you don't know what webbing is, it's kind of like a flat rope. And we keep that in case of an emergency where we need to tie a harness for hoist operations.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's a great point about map and compass, right? Having those skills sort of prior, at least our students here in the Wilderness Rec program, we like to make sure that they have those skills as the baseline before we start getting into all these gadgets that are really useful, but sometimes they don't work in some situations when you're really far back there, or maybe you don't have the right batteries, or your batteries are totally gone, right? In the wintertime, this happens a lot. So having that baseline of map and compass skills is certainly something we teach here at North Country. Chelsea or Jack, anything to add to that we haven't mentioned?
Sure. I definitely had a couple things stolen from me, so I'll pick one of the ones that wasn't, and I brought it out because I love this thing. It's my Jetboil. I like food, I like warmth, and I like water. I definitely like to keep a water filtration device on me, but sometimes you really can't make much use of that in the winter. You can always boil water. This thing works great as a French press. Everything fits right in here. I have a MSR whisper light as well, which is great for cooking, but for lightweight, you want to just boil and throw something in a bag. This is awesome. Something else, I guess, that wasn't mentioned. I just got a new sleep pad that I'm absolutely in love with, and I think it's called the Trail Pro by Thermarest, not sponsored, just like it. I tend to toss around a lot, and it does not make a lot of noise. It's a little heavier, but it is by far the most comfortable thing I've ever slept on. And this is coming from somebody who used to be very stubborn and not even want to carry anything that was too thick and too heavy, and just something thin for a ground barrier. And I'm getting older and I like comfort, and that thing is awesome. But other than that, a heavy emphasis on everything that was already mentioned. I think for good reason, a GPS can be helpful. I use a watch, it's a Garmin, but I think I see a lot of times people miscalculate their timing, and I don't want to emphasize using it for navigation. It's great. I think, definitely keep the map and compass. I want to say that over and over again. But when you're using a GPS, for people that are new and you're into the technology, it can help you dial in your time, look at the elevation you're doing, the mileage. And if you're planning and preparing and looking at a map, you'll have a better idea instead of asking some Joe Schmo on the internet, hey, how long did it take me to do Marcy Skylight and Gray? It's going to take you a different amount of time. And once you get your own body dialed in, sometimes using technology like that, I think, can be helpful for things other than navigation. So just something else to throw in there with the devices.
Great. And there's nothing wrong with being a creature of comfort in the backcountry. We talk about this a lot with sleeping pads, and Jetboil is a great example. We use the MSR whisper light stoves here at the college because it's better for more of an institutional setting, but certainly the Jetboil is awesome for, going out with a very small group or just by yourself if you're heading out. Jack, anything else to add to that before I move on?
Sure.
To where?
My first three are clothing, clothing, and clothing. Okay, it's all about being dressed properly. And as Pete Fish, retired Ranger, said, his best dressed corpses were wearing cotton. Okay, so if you want to win the award for being the best dressed, keep your cotton on. But other than that, it should be synthetic or wool. I'm not going to get into the fire because that would be right up there for me. The headlamp, I work in the Adirondack Hamlets to Huts Trail Center every now and then, and I'll come in and help people review the top, the 10 essentials, if you will, and I'll mention a headlamp, and my favorite comment is, oh, I'm going to be back before dark. And I tell them, you know what? Every person that gets rescued after dark by a ranger says the same thing. And just trying to reinforce that, of course, we carry it, not because we think we're going to be back after dark. It's because in case we are. My mantra has been from day one is I want to be prepared to survive the night, no matter what the time of year. And I need the gear. I don't need to be comfortable. I want to live. Okay, so that allows me to leave some things behind that'll keep me comfortable. But I want to be damn sure I'm going to live. The other thing is not a piece of equipment, but I think it's just as important, and that is a plan. Anticipate that something's going to go wrong, so that you already have in your mind when that does go wrong, you've already thought it through and said, okay, I know that my spouse at home is going to do X and someone else is going to do Y, and I've got a plan. And finally, I just want to, I guess it's a reflection of my old age. I love things like Spot and those kind of devices, but I don't want to communicate with the outside unless I have to. So therefore, I don't want a sat phone, because then someone's going to call me and say, did you take out the garbage? And that's not why I go in the wilderness. So I'm kind of old school that way, that, yeah, I certainly appreciate, and I have those emergency type of communication, but they're only for an emergency in my mind. And it's how I use a cell phone as well. At least I try to.
So we try not to order pizza when we're out in the lean-to from the sat phone. Is that what you're saying, Jack? Yeah, and that's you bring up a lot of good points, especially with having a plan. So one of the things we teach here at North Country in the Wilderness Rec program is having what's called an emergency response plan, right? And it can be called different things, but they're pretty detailed. The ones that we create for going out for 30 days, 15 days, with a detailed itinerary. Who are the people you're bringing? What's their emergency contact information, right? And you want some other information in there as far as contacts. We always have contacts for rangers in our first aid kits, for example, if we do have to make that emergency call that Jack is referring to, right? So these are all good parts of that very first leave no trace principle: plan ahead and prepare, right? Getting things ready before you head out. We're going to shift a little bit. I don't want to pick on people necessarily, but I want to just draw a little bit of awareness to some of the things we've seen maybe lately. And I'd like to know from your perspective, what are some of the trends that you've noticed here in the Adirondacks as far as being ill prepared? We can go with, let's see, anybody can answer that one first. I don't want to pick on people here.
I guess
I'll jump it. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Go ahead. Okay. Sorry. Woo. I'm going to emphasize again on the headlamps, because I feel like a lot of the ranger reports that I read, it always comes down to so-and-so came out in the dark, didn't have a headlamp. Another one that I feel, and this is seasonal, traction control. I see a lot of that in the winter. People using yak tracks to, hike a 46er. I tend to find a little one Cinderella slipper and I hike it out. And another thing, and this goes back to what Jack was saying, people who just aren't prepared to spend the night. There's a lot of people who go out, they don't even have a pack. The others I see more on the internet, not having a pack. I tend to see that when I'm actually out in the woods. I feel like I see more people who are traveling very, very lightly, or so light they're not carrying anything at all. And that's a little unnerving, especially when you're in the Santanoni range and people are heading out to Cooch and they dropped their pack, and the pack that they have is incredibly small, and they didn't have any snowshoes or traction control. Just ill preparedness, I guess. That was a really long way to say ill preparedness, but the necessities.
Jack, did you have a thought there?
I love the irony of, here we are in the age of information, the information age. We have all the knowledge of the world at our fingertips, and yet we have more people that are less educated and less prepared than ever before. So how do we change that? And I think that's the challenge in everything that we do, is how do we, here we got all of the world's knowledge at our fingertips, and yet we have all these people that are unprepared. I'll leave it at that.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one? Thoughts about things that you've seen as far as trends?
I'll chime in with just one more thing, Jimmy, to think about, to kind of tag off of what Jack said about the information that's out there and just the technology that's available to everyone. I would say, and this seems to be a trend among all the panelists that are talking, is people as the reliance on technology instead of the reliance on using the like skills or other pieces of information to make really good decisions. And rather than taking in what's around you and then making those decisions, it's like just looking at whatever that piece of technology is telling you to do. And I think that's a big trend that I've seen, is that rather than being able to take it in and make your own decision. You're sort of letting something else do the decision-making process for you, or someone else make that decision-making process for you.
Great, thank you, Will. And so there's a lot of great things that we can kind of point out. Some things that are trendy right now, don't involve a lot of gear. We see a lot of people trail running. I'm guilty of that myself, right? Going out and trail running. How far are you going back? And what do you have on your shoulders? Sometimes nothing, sometimes just a water bottle in your hand. So we do see a lot of trendy activities that sort of push people to go out, without a ton of gear with them. And from my perspective, that's one of the things that I have been seeing a lot more of lately in the past 10 years or so. And it's certainly becoming a problem in some cases, especially when we're talking about, getting into these, I don't want to say competitions, but who can hike the 46 the fastest and things like that, right? We're a culture of sort of, it's getting a little bit more competitive, right, these days. And so gear is still a part of that, though. One of the things that I do want to bring up is social media. And I know that this is opening up a can of worms maybe, but it's worth discussing because we talk about it in the classroom here at North Country. But how do you think social media impacts backcountry preparedness? Jenna, I'll start with you.
I have mixed feelings about social media. I think that there's a lot of potential, kind of like what Jack was saying. We have all this information at our fingertips, but I think a lot of it just kind of gets thrown out the window. I'm the first person, I like to read the trail condition Facebook pages just to kind of sit back and read the comments, but sometimes there's negativity, and you get a lot of new beginners that come in and they get fixated on doing the 46 or something like that, and they get misinformation, and it just gets a little bit messy.
Bobby, any thoughts on that? Social media?
Yeah, I think especially from the college age perspective, it alters our decision making in the backcountry quite a bit. As simple as just doing something that's more risky to get that social media shot that they wouldn't usually do if they weren't filming it or trying to get a photo. And that was a survey I think we did a little while ago. If the decision making that they're doing in the backcountry is getting altered by what they're trying to post on Facebook and Instagram, and most of them admitted that it was.
Yeah, and so social media is a way we definitely communicate, even here at the college, and Bobby, you do this as well, and Will, you can sort of advertise for yourself as a guide, right, and show what you're doing. And so that's kind of one side of it. And, there's other sides of it that maybe expose places that we don't really want to be exposed, right? So these secret places, I read an article in the New York Times recently that said, there's no secret places anymore, right? And so it's kind of a sad concept, but I don't know if I agree with it entirely, because I still like to think that there's places that only I know about. But I do think that social media plays a role. Any other comments on social media before I move on to the next question? Jack, did you have something?
Yeah, I think way back when, before we had cell phones or smartphones in particular, but both, you had to plan ahead. Where are we going to meet and when? And you had to anticipate. Well, now it's like, well, I'll call you when I leave. And so now it's an expectation that, oh, we don't really have to plan. When you're ready and I'm ready, we just go. And I think there's a perpetuation of kind of a false idea that, hey, there's all these beautiful places that we can go. Look who went such and such a place last weekend or yesterday, and I can go there too, and I don't have to think about that preparation stage. And of course, that's leave no trace principle number one. The potential for good is unlimited because all that knowledge is out there. Think about futuristic apps that when the parking lot is filled, it automatically tells your phone where an alternative place might be to go. So yeah, I think the potential is there, but I think we're a long ways to go to make it a positive rather than a negative.
Great, thanks, Jack, for your comments on that. I'm going to move into something a little more fun because it is around dinner time, and some of you are probably hungry, but I'm curious because backcountry preparedness isn't really all having to do with just gear. We have to talk about food at some point. What are some of your food ideas or some of your favorite backcountry meals that you've made recently or in the past that are kind of go-tos for you? I can see Bobby's putting his thinking cap on.
Pizzas are easy and fun and tasty.
Easy and fun and tasty?
Yeah.
Nice. Chelsea?
Just as of recently, very, very simple. And I got a lot of food that I like, but my favorite snack that I think you could turn into a meal. A lot of my friends suggest not doing it during the summer because it's bear bait, but I love bacon and breakfast ham. I grill it up either the night before or the morning of, and I keep it in a Ziploc bag. And I usually keep enough in my pocket, especially in the winter. It's salty, it has protein, it's fatty, it's delicious, and that's definitely been my go-to snack lately. So if you like meat, I highly recommend trying some bacon or some really good breakfast ham.
Sounds good. Will, how about you? I know some of the stuff you like because we've been in the field a lot together.
Yeah, we've definitely spent a few days in the field together. I would say that probably my number one favorite backcountry meal is chili mac, especially chili that comes in a can, which is really big and really heavy, and you bring out there. But that makes a really, really good killer dinner.
Jack, anything to add to that?
Yeah, two thoughts. One is that the expedition mentality, if I'm on a long trip and I really like to bake. I really like to take the time to cook good meals. The Knowles Cookery is my cooking Bible, and I love a lot of the meals in there, and a lot of them take time. So the flip side of that is, okay, I'm going on a specialized trip or I'm going climbing or I'm doing something else. Then I want to keep it simple. But I think, when we go on trips, my wife is a great cook, but when we go on trips, I'm the chef. And it's the one place that I can maybe cook at least as well, if not better than her. So yeah, the contrast there of being able to bake and take our time to make good meals.
Jack, you mentioned the Knowles Cookery. That's a great book. We use that. I was using that this week in one of my courses, and we discussed some of the differences between packing for pounds per person per day versus planning by meal, and when you would do each one of those things. And certainly with a long trip, here at the college, we'll do something that's maybe even 30 days long. And so we're going to want to really break down what we're packing for those 4 weeks by pounds per person per day. And so the Knowles Cookery is a great resource to kind of check out, which categories of food are going to give me the proper calories that I'm going to need based on what the temperature is going to be when I'm out there. And what do we know about the temperature in the Adirondacks? Well, right now it's awesome, right? So we have 70 today, maybe probably 40 degrees tonight. And so there's a certain bracket in that calculation of how much food you would want to pack to stay warm and keep your calories for this type of climate. Now, would that change for very extreme cold? Will knows this very well, same with Jack, and I'm sure the rest of you. You got to pump up those calories if you're going to be out there in the winter. And some of the meals that we eat here at the college have quite a bit of margarine or butter and some meats and cheeses. So you really are packing on those calories to stay warm. But there's a science behind packing food. And we definitely spend a lot of time working on that here at the college to get ready for those trips. So we've talked about a lot of different things, different pieces of gear, some things we've seen, out in the backcountry, some trends. And what I'd like to know is, where to from here. So if there's a person that's, on this Zoom session right now, that's a beginner and that's really looking to get out and start hiking or backpacking, what's the first piece of advice that you would give that person?
I'll start. Two things come to mind. One is read. nothing can compare with experience, but you can prepare for those experiences by reading as much as you can. And there was a study done quite a few years ago about outdoor people that had to get permits in the high peaks for their trips. So they were the trip leaders. And when they asked them what they had read in the way of magazines and books, the number 0 kept coming up. So that's number one. The other thing that is very personal for me is understanding what wilderness is all about and how it differs from other types of land classifications. Wilderness is a very special place, and the values that we put on it are different than other outdoor experiences. And I'm talking about the capital W. It's designated wilderness. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a believer that if it's wilderness, it should be managed as wilderness, and you have to be responsible to yourself and to others in the wilderness. So learn what that means. So
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Chelsea, go ahead.
Just to segue off of the reading a little bit, because that's definitely huge. There's a lot of information out there in the world of information, but also try meeting somebody who has a little bit more experience than you. With social media, there's the pros and the cons of that, but you can use that to reach out to other people that are willing to join hike groups, even in today, the day of COVID, because it's outside and everybody has their different comfort level, but just find somebody that has more experience, or maybe hire a guide. I've had a couple clients who were totally new to the Adirondacks. They'd been hiking, but they'd never been out in the winter, and they just wanted to hire somebody at least for one trip and pick my brain the entire way. And it was great because it in a way it was like refreshers for myself, because I was going over information that I had already known, and it was fresh questions from people with different perspectives, and it made me think of things differently and from other angles. So interacting with other people, I still enjoy doing that, meeting somebody who is better at something than me, because I'm going to learn something from them, and mirror that. If you're out on the trail somewhere, be observant, look at the people around you. If you're observant, you can generally pick up on things like, okay, the majority of people are wearing this. The majority of people have snowshoes. The majority of people are carrying headlamps, things like that. I guess that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. Will, how about you? What advice would you give to a beginner?
I think that besides what has already been said that I totally agree with, all that is the ability to be able to take in the big picture, and that can be applied to many different things, whether that's for what the goal of your trip is, to how you look at a map, right? Is being able to look at that big picture thing, which goes into preparedness as well, right? Sort of running through all those what if scenarios and how all that can happen. And I guess that seems kind of strange because that's not necessarily like a backcountry specific piece of advice, because that can be applied across almost all aspects of life. But I think that bringing that with you as a beginner into your backcountry mindset and being able to really have that big picture view of things is really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Bobby, Jenna, anything to add to that?
I would say check out your local spots before you get crazy and fixated on doing the 46 or the 35 down in the Catskills. There's a lot of hidden gems that people aren't aware of. Before I was able to transfer up to Region 5, I was down in Region 4. I was in Otsego County, but we rotated patrols down at Catterskill Falls, which is in the Catskills in Greene County. And that place is a madhouse all summer long. People wait in line in a vehicle for over an hour to park, and then they hike down in these stairs to these waterfalls. And it's beautiful, but people are driving up from New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut for, 3 hours or so. And there's no way that there's other spots like that are closer to them and easier access where they don't have to sit and wait. And I think social media plays a part in that, where, these easy accessible big spots are pulling all these people in, but there's a ton of other stuff that you can get your feet wet with closer to home.
Agreed. A lot of great spots. Bobby, did you have something you were going to add?
Yeah, I would just kind of reiterate the seeking good mentorship. And on social media platforms, some people can be pretty rude or cutthroat, and there's usually a few good eggs out there that are willing to share some information that actually know a lot of stuff. So I think finding those people and trying to work with them is important.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. Chris Knight, if you could help me monitor the chat here, maybe we'll take a question from the audience. I don't know which one was first. I'm asking.
There's a few in there, Jimmy, but maybe the most recent one is about bear bags.
Oh, okay.
Now, obviously, you guys, some of you can probably, know that some areas where you can't use a bear bag, you have to use a container and so on. So maybe that discussion would be a good one.
Sure. Yeah. So for folks that haven't been to the area, we have bear canister rules in the high peaks, and we have recommendations to use bear canisters in a lot of areas outside of that. But technically speaking, in wild forest areas, you can hang your food. And so we teach for the first half of our practicum expedition, we're hanging food. And we usually use kind of like a weather resistant stuff sack. I think that's what it is, right, Will? That's how I would describe it. Will's our gear room manager too. A weather resistant stuff sack and a nice, what's the length rope that we use, Will? 50 feet of something.
Well, yeah. So usually we're sending people out, if we are hanging bear bags, with 100-foot section of between 7 to like 8 mil rope, nylon rope. That stuff's fairly inexpensive, but also strong enough to be able to hold a fairly sizable like bear bag.
Awesome. Yeah. And it takes a lot of practice. It's really hard to talk about how you would do that remotely right here. But really what I teach students is we're going to want to hang at least 12 feet high, 4 to 6 feet out. If you can do more than that. The idea being that you don't want your food to be hanging right next to a tree. Critters can crawl up, bears can crawl out and reach out and grab things, and have been known to do that. But I think the bottom line is checking the area before you go to make sure, it's an area that, some areas we don't see a lot of black bear activity. Some areas there are laws where you have to use a canister. And again, that's in the high peaks.
The most vicious Adirondack animal is the red squirrel.
Yes.
They'll chew through anything, and so beware of the red squirrel. Obviously, bears are a problem where you find them, but I very rarely run into bears outside of the high peaks.
Yep, likewise. What's another question you have in here?
Jimmy, there was another one here. Could you give advice about how best to stay warm at night? That's a good question.
Great question. Who'd like to chime in on that? How best to stay warm at night?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I love staying warm. And in my opinion, the sleeping bag that you buy, first of all, is incredibly important. You can't cheap out when you want a good sleeping bag. Lightweight, obviously, for packing. You got to know the rating. Adirondack camping, my year-round bag is pretty much 20 degrees because I tend to run cold, and I'd rather be able to zip open my bag at night. The sleep pad that I mentioned earlier, staying insulated from the ground, that's incredibly important. Other little tricks that I find for staying warm, besides you can, boil some water, put it in an Nalgene, put it in your sleeping bag with you to keep you warm. That's one little trick. Getting up the next morning is huge. I like to use my clothes for the next day and put it in a stuff sack. And I use that for my knee pillow because I need knee pillows. and that keeps my clothes for the next day warm, adds a little bit more insulation for my legs. Sometimes my boots go in there with me in a bag, so that way obviously I don't get the inside of the bag wet. Definitely the type of bag is important, and that's very personal. It depends on how you sleep. Some people like mummy, some not. But definitely a good bag with a good rating. I have a 20 degree and a 0 degree, and those are the two that I use. In the wintertime, I have a 20 degree liner that can add 20 degrees to my 0 bag if need be, or my 20 degree bag. And I have stayed pretty darn comfortable. There's been a few nights where I was uncomfortable, but I survived. But other than that, I'm usually toasty warm and zipping open and airing out in the middle of the night.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. Anybody else want to chime in on how to stay warm at night? It's a great topic.
Food. Eat something, have a good meal before you go to bed. You know, how often have we said, oh, I'm exhausted, I don't want to cook, I'm just going to go to bed. Now take the time to have a good meal, have something warm to drink. And then if you wake up cold, eat some more. One of the joys of being outdoors is that you can't, there's no problem in eating too much. The other thing that I would change your socks. If you haven't changed them, have dry socks and wear your socks. What I've found and of course your hat, that kind of goes with that almost without saying, but if you're a novice, maybe that's new to you, but have the hat on. And then finally, what I found worked pretty well in the winter, if I was chilly, is my thermal control were my mittens. If I was getting really cold, I'd put on mittens, and that helped me a lot. And then if I got too warm, I'd take off one mitten. So that's a couple of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Anybody else have secret tricks for staying warm at night? I know here, go ahead.
Sorry, I just one more quick thing that I thought of, and this might seem kind of funny, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to go to the bathroom and it's cold, just go. If you hold it and you have liquid within you, you're actually not going to retain your body heat quite as nicely. So going to the bathroom and getting that out of you is actually going to help you stay warmer in your sleeping bag. At least that's what a very experienced old timer had told me a long time ago. And I use that and I swear it works. So just get up and go.
Oh yeah, we absolutely teach that one here at North Country, especially in the wintertime. Sometimes you get up twice in the middle of the night because you're drinking a lot of hot drinks, trying to keep hydrated right before bed too. Another question, or unless anybody else has anything to chime in, Will, Bobby?
Did we mention a hot Nalgene down at the bottom of your sleeping bag?
I think Chelsea said that. Did you say that, Chelsea? Yeah. Yeah, so just a Nalgene like this, hard shell preferred, not any of the soft shell Nalgenes, because sometimes they will wilt and fall over. But that is an awesome trick. I've used it multiple times in the backcountry, especially in the wintertime. Chris, do we have another question that you can see up there? I think
sure. Yeah, there's a couple here. There was a good question that I know a lot of folks are also, getting out of the backcountry paddling, not just hiking and backpacking. So there's a question about some, what are the basics to take paddling? Maybe somebody wanted to take a crack at that.
Great question. Bobby, you can comment on this. You've been bringing your crew out on whitewater recently. What are some of the things that you guys bring with you?
I think it's important, especially right around now, to have the proper cold weather paddling gear. So whether it's a dry suit or like a 5 mil neoprene wetsuit with pogies, just making sure you really have that warm clothing to be in the water for an extended amount of time, and then maybe having a dry bag with some extra stuff with that, and then obviously having that means of kind of a call out protocol for an emergency rescue if you do submerge and you don't have a ton of time to hang out really cold. And then it is kind of dependent on the kind of paddling you're doing, but I think a small repair kit to fix punctures in boats is really important. Even just something as small as like plumber's putty that you can get at anywhere store hardens up and fills those holes in really nicely.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. Anybody else with tips on paddling? paddlers out there?
Know how to self-rescue too.
Great point. Absolutely. We do teach that before we even get out on the water here, how to do a T-rescue. And students sometimes don't like it because that's like how we kick off the expedition by getting wet in the water. But it's a good lesson to learn how to get back in the boat. Any other thoughts on paddling?
Swimming. I know it might sound ridiculous, but my mother raised me to realize that swimming is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And if you're going to get into paddling, you should at least know how to float or how to do the doggy paddle or something, in my opinion. But
Awesome.
There's a question here that I think is important because as a novice, sometimes we worry about the wrong things. There's a lot of things to worry about in the outdoors, but Margaret asks about, are you worried about being attacked by animals, snakes, etc., while sleeping outdoors? And what precautions do we have? And Margaret, I just want to let you know what the Adirondacks is one of the safest places you could in the world that you could camp and not worry about snakes. Well, there's select areas where there are rattlesnakes in the Adirondacks, but in general, it's not an issue. Coyotes, those just aren't. If you know, our students would hear a coyote, and occasionally one would get real nervous. And I said, if we get to see a coyote, consider yourself the luckiest student here. And the biggest thing that we have to worry about, of course, is black flies and mosquitoes and no-see-ums. So just want to reinforce that there obviously bears in the high peaks. You have to be cautious and be careful. But even in the high peaks, it is so rare to have a person. Yes, your gear can be ravaged, but the number of people that have been attacked, no one's been attacked by a bear. 99% it's self-defense. So that's my 2 cents there.
Great points. Thanks for bringing that up, Jack.
Jimmy, there was one also about layering of clothing, recommendations for layering. In other words, your cotton sweatshirt is not enough to keep you warm, right? What would you guys say for, or your recommendations? How's, the importance of layering, right?
Well, Will actually, he'd be a great person to answer this question as well. But so we teach what's called the 3-layer system here at North Country, and having a base layer, and we're talking synthetic materials, or it could be merino wool, anything that is, not cotton, right? So breathable stuff. Then we're talking about an insulating layer, which could be anything from, thick wool to fleece to a down jacket to a synthetic jacket that almost looks like it's down. And then the shell layer is the third. And you're going to want that, of course, in this climate to be waterproof, right? Some jackets that you buy will, if you check the tags, they'll say windproof. And that's fantastic, but I want mine to say waterproof and windproof, or at the very least, waterproof. And so movement between the 3-layer system like that is, in my opinion, the best way to go. Gear these days, you have zippers, we have pit zips, all sorts of cool stuff to kind of keep dry while we're hiking. And you can always layer, delayer as you kind of move through your day. So that's kind of the short version of what we teach here. Will, anything to add to that we've done in the classroom?
No, I thought that was pretty spot on. I would just say that with your 3-layer system, there are almost infinite variations to the way that you use those 3 layers, and that there isn't a one-size-fits-all like layering system out there. What works for one person might not work for someone else in the very same conditions on the exact same day. And so it does take a little bit of time to figure out what works for you, which goes all the way back to what we were talking about earlier, where, don't jump off right into the deep end, going out on, this super arduous hike, having never used any really of the equipment that you've brought before. So start out small, test these things out, figure out, what works for you on this day, in this weather, in those temperatures, and then take it from there. and sort of make those adjustments accordingly. One of the big takeaways from that whole thing is it takes time, right? And there isn't, again, that one size fits all. So it's going to take some time to figure all those things out. And that's not necessarily what a lot of people want to hear, but that's the reality of it, is that you can read things and people can give you suggestions, but until you actually try these things out, again, on shorter, less arduous things, you're not going to know. So
Great advice. Thanks, Will.
Jimmy, I see a couple people are asking about where can they get map and compass skills. And I think you've got the Adirondack Mountain Club that runs a series of workshops. Just about any guide, outdoor guide that a reputable outdoor guide can help you get those skills. Certainly, I'll give my plug to the Adirondack Hamlets to Huts Trail Center in Saranac Lake. Stop in there and they can hook you up with some people that could help you as well.
Great, thanks, Jack. Yeah, and we're going to run a course in the fall here at North Country called GPS in Backcountry Navigation. And I believe, Will, you taught that the last time. I've taught it a few times. And so that'll also be coming up. I think that's in October. So we're still kind of planning that one out accordingly, just like everything else with COVID. All right.
So do you want to do a couple speed round, really quick ones, and then we'll kind of wind things down here, Jimmy?
Yeah. There
was one more that I thought was, two more from the chat that might be good. One is tips to keep your feet from getting sore after longish hikes.
Good one.
And then also a question that was, what should I not bring on a day hike as a beginning hiker? What do I not need to bring on a day hike?
Do not bring a full-size watermelon.
Your machete.
Your machete. Awesome.
For the what not to bring, I've been playing around with the system that it takes a little time, but write down everything that you are bringing in your pack and then categorize it into, like, I use it every day. I only used it once. I never touched it. And some of those things that we don't want to touch or use, like a med kit, still need to be with us. So there's a little bit of a gray area there, but that can help start and drop some of those extra things that you don't need, like too many layers or a huge candle, whatever it might be.
Anything else we should not bring?
An axe.
An axe, yeah.
That's a good one.
All
right,
That's for hiking, but I have multiple times found buckets with like a toilet seat on them at camping areas. So especially when there's a privy there, you really don't need to do that. And I don't want to find it. So
good point. I've seen a couple of those too, and it's sort of curious. I'm not really sure what to think about those. All right, let's do one. We'll do one last speed round here about the foot question. So, Chris, remind me, what do you do with your sore feet after hiking?
Yeah, that also might involve, before or during your hike, so you don't get sore feet. How do you kind of prevent or solve that problem should it happen?
All right, who's got a thought on that?
Couple things. Obviously, if you feel a blister coming on, take care of it immediately. It's a lot easier to deal with a hot spot than it is a blister. If you're hiking during the day and your feet are sore, take a break and soak your feet in a nice cold stream. Obviously, you got to get, your whole body has to get in shape, not just the muscles. But your feet over time need to get in shape. So give them a break. We used to say that your feet are your diesel power. Diesel will get you in the wilderness, and diesel will get you out. So take care of them.
Good point, Jack. Any other thoughts on the foot question?
Airing out, if you don't have the option for the cold stream, which I'm a huge fan of, because nothing feels better than cold water on your feet or your head. But if you don't have that option and your feet are getting really just wet and moist and sweat, and you feel like you might be getting some blisters, just take the time to take your socks and your boots off and let your feet air out a little bit. If you have dry socks, put dry socks on. But other than that, just segueing off of what was just said, you know, obviously you got to get your feet in shape, make sure you have the right shoes, make sure you're wearing good socks, but the cold water and airing your feet out and letting them dry can definitely help.
Will, any thoughts on that?
Besides what's been said, I guess really the only thing that I could add in would be some aftermarket insoles. There are many really good companies that now make aftermarket insoles that you don't need to go to a podiatrist and, you know, spend you know, an obscene amount of money getting these things. They are still a little expensive, but they are really worth it, in my opinion. I have aftermarket insoles in all of my footwear that I use, whether those are hiking boots, mountaineering boots, ski boots, snowboard boots, approach shoes, trail running shoes. And since kind of making that switch, my feet have been really thankful.
And of course, don't forget to bring a massage therapist with you to rub your feet.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, and this doesn't work for every situation, but I've worn a pair of liner socks over or underneath my wool socks in some cases if I'm doing a trip with maybe a newer pair of boots or a really stiff pair of boots. And that's worth mentioning as well, as you should break in your boots, break in your trail shoes, make sure they're waterproof, especially if you're going to be in this area. But liner socks work well because the friction will oftentimes go on that liner sock and not on your heel or your toe. And that's in my experience. And I know some folks that don't ever use liner socks, but for me, that's worked pretty well in the past. Awesome. Any other thoughts before we kind of wrap it up?
I think we covered most of the questions there, Jimmy.
Great. That's so awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to do some audience questions. I was really hoping. Last time we didn't really get a chance to do that because we had a lot to say. But I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. To learn more about the Wilderness Rec program, you can go to nccc.edu/wilderness to learn about our program, 2-year program. We're going to be offering some more stuff for the public coming up. We're working on that now. We're just kind of climbing out of the COVID situation as everybody sort of is. We're looking forward to getting things moving in the fall 2021 semester. Thank you to the panelists for being with us tonight and taking some time out of your evening, sharing your stories from being out in the field. We really, really appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful night. Enjoy this awesome weather, and hopefully it'll continue.
Thanks, everybody. I was going to mention just quickly too, the recording of this will be on our website tomorrow. That's nccc.edu/live if you know some folks that might want to listen or if you want to share it. So, and also thanks to International Paper for sponsoring the series. We'll be back again in 2 weeks to talk about gardening and then birds after that. So come back and see us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.